Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone watching this. Welcome to Microsoft JDConf. This is the second day of the conference, and yesterday we had a blast. And tomorrow we're going to have a blast again because we are on a roll. My name is Bruno Borges. I'm a PM here at Microsoft. I work with the Java engineering group, and we are having a lot of fun. Believe me, Java at Microsoft goes way far as you can think of. And I'm getting feedback. So let me shut off all these tabs I have on my computer because I was getting myself. I was listening to myself. That's not cool. Here's the thing. I have a few slides to show you before we get started with the keynote. So let me jump over to my slides because I have a few important information for you. So let me talk quickly. If you're not here yesterday, I have a few logistics to share with you and the schedule and a few resources. So let's go ahead and talk about logistics. First thing, if you want to comment, send questions or anything like that, just go to Twitter and use the hashtag JDConf, or you can send questions over the chat on YouTube, on the live streaming over YouTube. You can find that on the Microsoft Developer Channel, and it's streaming live there, so it shouldn't be hard to find. The sessions are every 30 minutes after the keynote. They start at 9 a.m. and go all the way to the last session at 12:30. There will be a 5 minutes break between sessions, and we will have the speakers talking to each other. Myself, I'll be welcoming the next speaker and talking briefly with the previous speaker. So it's an opportunity to have a more casual chat over these weird times that we all live in. So important notes. This conference has free water. You just go to the kitchen, whatever place you have in your house or office, and yeah, you have free water. Go for it. Cookies may be available, right? Especially if you're at home and if you don't have cookies, that's sad. That's sad. Why don't you have cookies at home? Everybody should have cookies. Here's the thing: you can go to YouTube and search for how to make cookies. Not just how to build Java apps. Right? There's lots of stuff at YouTube. Um, and the nearest bathroom just around the corner, unless you have like a tall house with several floors and you forgot to put a bathroom in one of the floors where your office is, then you're gonna have to go up or down the stairs, but still should be close. And no lines in your bathroom, hopefully. All right. Okay. So we had a great first day yesterday. Here are some tweets that we actually got even before that. I will be collecting the tweets and putting them at the beginning. I'll pull some tweets again at the end of this conference at this day today, and tomorrow I'll bring some more and show you what other things people are saying about it. Jim Goth is blogging about the conference, so check him out on Twitter, and you can get his insights, his perspective about JDConf, about all the sessions and the speakers presenting all the content. Dr. Heinz is one of the speakers. Great guy who lives in Greece and runs a conference called JCrete, along with Kirk Pepperdine. It's an amazing spot. And Kevin, thank you so much for sharing the Java conference by Microsoft. Yes, 2020 is a crazy year. Here we are. Okay, so keynote starts at 8:10 a.m. Oh, what a morning. Or even before that, because I'm already running out of slides. So join Martin Verberg and George Adams. George works with me on the PM team. Martin Verberg leads the Java engineering group here at Microsoft. And they will be talking to you about the things they are doing with OpenJDK, contributions that the team has already done, things that they are exploring, adopt OpenJDK, how we help maintain the infrastructure and builds, etc. So it's an interesting conversation. So you really don't want to miss this keynote. If you want to know why Microsoft has a Java engineering group, why does Microsoft has a Java team? That's the question everybody's asking. Yes, we do. Yes, we have a reason, or actually multiple reasons. So here's the schedule for today after the keynote. We have several speakers that you may have heard of, may have seen before. There is one person, one speaker here I would like to highlight, Venkat. There's another speaker I would like to highlight, Trisha G. And then another one, Emily Young, and Monica Beckwith, and Kate Stanley, and Melissa McKay, and Jesse G, and Mario Gray. All of them, actually, because this was a very special conference that we put together with all of our friends in the Java community. Microsoft actually, in the Java engineering group, we have lots of Java champions. We have great relationship with the Java community. We have lots of friends. And when we told them, hey, would you like to be part of a Java conference hosted by Microsoft? Everybody, no exception, said yes. So just stick around, watch these sessions. If you cannot make today, that's okay. Videos will be available on demand. So there's no reason not to see all of these sessions. And sessions, again, are 25 minutes, very fast-paced, very amazing content, only the best of them all. So just stay together with us. Tomorrow, we have keynotes by Mala Gupta and Bruno Souza. If you want to understand how to work in the Java community, how the Java community can work with you and for you and together, definitely check out Mala Gupta's segment on tomorrow's keynote. And Bruno Souza has been doing an amazing job helping Java developers, or any developer, actually, not just Java developers. It's because Bruno has a history with Java, but any developer, actually, he's been teaching and coaching and helping developers how to expand their careers and how to get better jobs, how to get new learnings and really expand the knowledge, how to contribute to open source and bump up their careers. So I think those two keynotes combine really well, because once you watch Mala Gupta, you understand how the Java community works, and then you watch Bruno and you understand how you can work with the Java community. So definitely a keynote that you have to watch. And in terms of the schedule for the last day tomorrow, we have lots of speakers, and we have Red Hat with Edson Yanaga. We have Dr. Hines. We have Simon Reeder from Azul System, our partner. We have a few Microsoft talks. Let me talk to you about these Microsoft talks. We have Rich Turner. Rich is actually a .NET guy who I am trying to turn him over to the Java side. And Rich will share tips and tricks for productivity for Java developers on Windows. So if you're a Java developer and you work with Windows, Rich will tell you how to use the Windows terminal for Java, how to play with Windows subsystem for Linux, and things like that. So I think it's a very interesting talk. Jonathan Giles, our Java architect for the Azure SDK team, he will actually bring his knowledge and share with you how to design great Java APIs, how to design and build great Java APIs. And finally, Reza Rahman will share all the things that you need to know about Java EE, especially on Azure, how we are supporting Java EE standards and Jakarta EE on our Azure services. And finally, Dashawn Carter, who just recently moved to Redis Labs. Dashawn, congratulations on your new role at Redis Labs. And Dashawn will share a little bit of Azure and Spring. Finally, we're going to have an Ask Me Anything panel at 12:30 tomorrow with the Java engineering group. We're going to have Martin and George, myself, and we're going to have a few of our engineers in our JVM team. And any questions that people have, just bring them over. If you have a question that you want to send now so you don't forget, just put that on the hashtag JDConf on Twitter, and make sure you mention me or Martin or George or somebody that will be on the panel so we can get the notification easily. So without further ado, I would like to welcome on the virtual stage Martin Verberg and George Adams. Hello, Martin.
Hey, Bruno, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? And George, hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we
That's
can.
Good. That's better than last time.
You two are in the UK, is that right?
That is correct.
It's been rainy. Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
What do you mean it's raining in the UK? That's where the rain comes from, George. Like anywhere in the world, when it's raining, people go like, "Oh, here comes this UK rain again." Like you guys outsource that rain. Actually, well, you export that rain.
We export the rain.
Anyways, well, welcome.
That's an interesting keynote.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I know. Of course.
Next time.
Why should it be different? We need to talk about rain. It's an important subject. It scales, by the way, very easily. All right, no more jokes. Please bring on your slides or whatever you have to share and talk, and take over from here, man. See you later.
We did slides, right, George? Somewhere.
Wait, I thought this was a no slide keynote. Oh,
there we go. Oh, thank goodness for that.
Next time. Cool. Well, we're already running a minute late, which we always seem to be. So I guess we'll get things rolling. So thanks, Bruno, although he's dropped off already, for such a inspiring introduction as always. Welcome to the day 2 keynote, Microsoft Java in U. We've specifically included you if you're watching. My name is George Adams. As Bruno mentioned, I'm a program manager in the Java engineering group. And I'm joined by Martijn, who is the principal group manager for the Java engineering group. Before we get started, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone who has made this event possible, and to all of you who have attended so far. It's super exciting to be talking at Microsoft's first ever Java conference. And we hope there will be real beer and real cookies that aren't in your kitchen next time. So hopefully you'll come back next year. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about the past, which is something that unfortunately we felt that we had to do. Luckily for me, my scapegoat was that I was at school during this particular period. So I'm going to hand over to my dinosaur of a colleague, Martijn, who's going to fill us in by what I'm talking about.
Excellent. And I'm very pleased to be called a dinosaur. According to my 5-year-old, dinosaurs are just the best thing ever. So I'm going to take that as a major compliment. Yes, the distant past. When Java was in a simpler age, back in the late 90s and early noughties, we used Notepad for our software development. We had a printed stack of JavaDoc on our desks next to us. And if you were really brave and bold, you were using Ant as the bleeding edge build tool of choice. So let's revisit. Let's go back to 1997, George. Let's fire on.
Let's go.
Awesome. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Visual J++. We're sorry about that. Clearly, at the time, Microsoft wanted to jump in on Java's popularity. They were very keen on trying to see if they could get Java to work as a first-class citizen in terms of the Windows UI toolkit. The approach by today's Microsoft standard was completely wrong. We apologize for that in the past. And we hope to demonstrate to you today why the Microsoft of today is very, very different, and we're going to engage in a very different way. So we'll touch on one more point about this. On to the next slide, please, George. Awesome. So as you can see, when the internet was back in low fidelity, you see the wonderful sort of pixelated image there of poor old Mr. Bill Gates with the really a bit of a clickbait title there. We're using the BBC, of course, because we are from the UK. For those of you who are playing Spot the Accent, my accent is actually from New Zealand, for which I humbly apologize. I will attempt to speak slowly enough and pronunciate my words correctly so you can understand me. Luckily, we have George here who does speak the Queen's somewhat better than I do. But again, back in the day when big companies sued each other over this stuff, that's what happens. So we go for a different approach. So over to George to talk about the new Microsoft.
Thanks, Martijn. So luckily, I'll reiterate, luckily, we are a new Microsoft. In 2018, our CEO, Satya Nadella, said, "We are all in on open source." And that was a really pivotal moment in the strategic direction that Microsoft took going forwards with all of its internal products. So with Java being a pretty new concept, let's dive straight into Java and see how sort of if that philosophy prevails, let's say, in the org that we've put together. So Microsoft has used Java very heavily in the past 5 years in all sorts of products, and we wanted to give something back, but we wanted to approach the Java ecosystem humbly. We have a really strong connection with supporting developers through tooling, and we wanted to bring some of that strength to the Java ecosystem. And we want to be focused on being part of the community. We spent lots of time signing agreements, which Martin will talk about later on. I think he's run out of ink in his pen. And talking to developers like yourselves and building partnerships with other key companies. For the cynics in the room, I'm sure there are some, we are obviously a commercial entity. And the best thing we can do is make Java great on Azure and hope that you'll try it out. But Java really is a broad ecosystem. So without further ado, back to Martin, who's going to talk a little bit about the JClarity acquisition.
So, for my sins, roughly this time last year, I was the CEO of JClarity, which was a Java performance tooling startup using machine learning to figure out why your JVM wasn't running so well. George was actually working with me as our director of open source at the time, and Kirk Pepperdine is another name that you'll have heard of before, who was the CTO of the company. And Microsoft came knocking on our door. And at the time, there were a few companies interested in JClarity and our technology. And the thing that really, struck home for us when we flew over to Redmond and we chatted to the various senior execs at Microsoft was the real wholehearted truth of that, Microsoft was all in on open source. They had open source .NET Core. They have Visual Studio Code. They're working on TypeScript. They have this huge open source office now. One of the biggest contributors to the Linux kernel, so on and so forth. And they were just super excited to really hear about the Java story and see how they could help. And it was a bit of a no-brainer for us to come and join. So here we are today. And of course, we have bolstered the JClarity acquisition with a bunch of other JVM experts for the Java engineering group. And let's jump on to the next slide and talk a little bit about that. So here's the first of a little bit of kind of behind the scenes information we're going to give you in this keynote, which is stuff we don't regularly talk about as a big company. Big companies are always a little bit careful about talking about the internal stuff, but we'll share some things here. Just like the Java ecosystem itself, it was super important for us to pull together an incredibly diverse and distributed team. And we set about doing just that. So Microsoft went out and hired some industry luminaries, names that you may have heard of, like Monica Beckwith, who was the former Java architect at ARM and previously at Sun and Oracle in the Java platform group there. We had folks like Charlie Gracie, one of the principal engineers at IBM on the OpenJ9 runtime, and a whole host of Microsoft runtime infrastructure and tooling veterans who, once they'd heard that there was going to be a Java engineering group internally, jumped at the chance to come and join us. The super interesting thing about this group is that we are over about 5 or 6 time zones. We have folks in the UK, France, Austria, Canada, East and West Coast, the US, East Coast, West Coast, Central. So we really are kind of scattered quite far around the world. And this can provide, a whole host of challenges. We're also a multi-generational team. We have folks who are fresh out of graduation in university all the way through to industry veterans and people from a whole bunch of different cultural backgrounds. And at Microsoft, one of the things that we work on internally across the whole company is about diversity and inclusion. So we spend an awful lot of time on some inclusion training, figuring out the cultural norms, the communication norms, what binds us together as a group. We use things like architecture decision records and pillar documents to make our decisions. And we have a whole host of initiatives like that running internally. So interestingly, my role is probably more about the communication and culture than it is about the exact technical engineering, which I leave to the experts in my group. On to the next slide. Cool.
Thanks, Martin. So as I mentioned already, Java is used in many different business areas in Microsoft. LinkedIn is the key one, which is why we gave it such a large box. LinkedIn, for those that aren't aware, is not only one of the largest JVM users in Microsoft, it's actually one of the largest JVM users on the planet. It has over 250 million JVMs running, or something like that anyway. And we have over 1,000 developers building native Xamarin Apps. And of course, the Surface Duo depends on Android. There are several services running in Azure that depend on Java, and the list keeps on growing, as well as SQL Server coming with Java embedded out of the box, and our good old game, Minecraft. So when things sort of got together and the team was assembled, we started with LinkedIn, and we looked at where we could help with performance tuning. And so when you've got so many JVMs running, it's important that performance is running nicely, that your performance is key. And because LinkedIn is still growing users, that data is only getting bigger. So we had to help them with as many JVM optimizations as we could. We're focusing on a lot of garbage collector at the moment, and Martin's going to cover some of the patches in Shenandoah later on in the deck. And behind Azure Big Data, there are Apache Big Data projects that all run on the JVM. We've got a native Java SDK for all the Azure services, and we have some massive third-party customers such as Adobe and Daimler running their Java workloads on Azure today. Our engineers also tell us they've been working on Minecraft, but unfortunately, we're a little bit skeptical of how much work is actually getting done on that project. If we lift the curtain up again and peek behind the scenes, you'll see that from day one, our main focus was on establishing an internal center of excellence. We created a Java at Microsoft community as a central hub, and naturally cross-group and team collaboration fell from this. There were lots of opportunities. Microsoft is a very large organization using Java in far more places than we had ever realized when we joined. And unsurprisingly, there is a lot of big data on Java there. If we look at the kind of development workflow that we would typically use, we send in a combination of VM, tooling, and services experts to assess, and then work is prioritized based on customer needs and ecosystem impact. We have an upstream everything policy. This is really key. We aim to upstream all of our changes to the OpenJDK project, as it allows other JVM users to benefit from our changes as well. If we go over to developer outreach for a minute, the developer outreach folks have been working really hard to provide the ecosystem with high quality, informative material. That's via our blogs, via our Twitter channel, and we've also got some really useful pages on our docs channel, which help people with migrating to Java 11 and so forth. We've spoken at or attended countless conferences, including Oracle Code 1, DevNexus, FOSDEM, Devox UK, Devox Belgium, and also we have a little internal bet going on as to how many Twitter followers we'll have at the end of this conference. So if you haven't already, please follow our Twitter channel, and you may well be able to get Martin and I on Xbox as our promotion. So please remember to do that one thing. So I think it's back to Martin to talk about the OCA.
Awesome. Thank you, George. Yes, everybody would love an Xbox for sure. And I know my son has definitely been waiting for that one. Even though he's only 5 years old, he's not even allowed to play on an Xbox, for crying out loud. But he still knows about them for some reason. Cool. So the OCA. So this is a really important agreement and a bit of a historical moment that Microsoft signed this, in fact. This is the official OpenJDK contributor agreement. And this is what you need to sign in order to contribute back to Java itself. Now, for Microsoft to sign such a document, which has some legal ties, effectively, and some business implications and things like that, was a really huge milestone for us. And it enabled our whole Java engineering group to start contributing patches and working on things like the ARM port, which I'll dig into a little bit later. So we're incredibly proud of this moment. As you can see, it got some tech news coverage with people scratching their heads, again, wondering where the hell had frozen over. But this was a fantastic milestone. And to kind of give you a little bit of behind the scenes info on that one, as you would expect at a big company, you have to engage with your legal arm, get buy-in from senior business folks, and so on and so forth. And it just normally takes time. There was such enthusiasm for us to get this OCA signed that our internal legal folks, have commented that this was one of the things that was signed in record time by their standards, which really sort of is a bit of a testament to how seriously and how quickly we wanted to get this stuff done. Cool. We'll dig into a little bit more about the community stuff. So as George mentioned at the beginning of the talk, having us join and be partners within all of the Java communities is of critical importance. Java is an incredibly diverse and federated universe. We have Oracle, obviously, who runs, Java Enterprise, Java Standard Edition, and is the leader of the OpenJDK project. And so they're, of course, naturally seen as a bit of a leader in the Java world. But the reality is the Java ecosystem is just vast. It runs on little IoT devices, on big data and big compute clusters. It's used for standard line of business applications. It's used for games. It's just everywhere. And so it's really critical that Microsoft joins in the key communities, such as OpenJDK, such as Adopt OpenJDK, which is the world's most popular OpenJDK distribution behind Oracle's, and joining things like the Java Community Process, which is the Java standards body. Now, that's one we haven't completed quite yet, and you'll see my little legal hammer symbol there, because, again, this requires us to look carefully through a lot of legal agreements and make sure that things like patents and all that sort of stuff are covered off. But again, there's an incredible amount of willingness for Microsoft to go do this, and we hope to share the good news with you sometime this calendar year. All right, so as mentioned previously, we signed the OCA, and straight away our engineers who were chomping at the bit to go and actually work on the core Java itself started working on a whole bunch of patches. I'll talk to a couple here very quickly and then dig into one or two of them and show you a little bit of the code behind the scenes. So as you can see, we had customer workloads which were really concerned about garbage collection. So you can see from the titles here that we were doing a lot of work with Red Hat in fixing up and tidying up some of the areas of the Shenandoah garbage collector. Now, Shenandoah is a garbage collector which is designed for low pause, large heap situations. And it was available in Java 11, but sort of on a side repository. So we worked with Red Hat to clean up some of the last remaining bugs and issues, and together with Red Hat and others, we proposed that it get merged into Java 11 proper. And then there was some really fantastic engineering done by the Red Hat folks to make sure that could land in a very safe manner. Basically, if you don't switch Shenandoah on, it's a no-op as far as the JVM is concerned. And this has now enabled Shenandoah for all Java 11 users out there. So the entire ecosystem can now use this wonderful garbage collector. You'll also see that we worked on things like Mac OS code signing, right? Everyone who's been upgrading their Mac OS X behind the scenes has probably run into Apple's increasing tightening of security. And it was no different for Java. And so George here actually spent a lot of time upstream to Adopt OpenJDK, looking at the code signing issue and submitting some patches directly to OpenJDK for that. So I'll dive into the anatomy of a specific patch next. Awesome. So here's an example of one of the patches that Aditya, one of our principal engineers, worked on. So he was running a tool called JC Stress, which stresses the garbage collector and some of the internals of Hotspot when he was looking at a whole bunch of this Shenandoah work. And JC Stress, sure enough, crashed the JVM whilst we were running Shenandoah. And when he dug in, he had a look at the C1 generated code, which is the C1 is the first of the just-in-time compilers. We call it the client compiler as such. And there was just a little bug there, which was treating 32-bit values and not upcasting them to 64 bits on 64-bit hosts. And so, sometimes you always hear developers complain, oh, it's the compiler's fault. Well, in this case, it actually really was. So that's just, one small example of the type of patches we work on. We'll quickly jump to another one. Here is one about MD5 hashing. Now, MD5 hashes is something that all of you are probably using under the hood today. The security experts amongst you will argue, and I sympathize with this, that MD5 is an aging technique that should really be replaced by more modern ones. But the reality is there's a lot of MD5 running out there today, and especially if you're using Java 11. And we detected, Ludovic in particular, detected that the MD5 hash was actually written in Java itself, which is normally perfectly fine, but it's such an intense operation at scale for folks who are constantly hitting this, that he converted it to what we call an intrinsic. So when the Java call goes into Hotspot, Hotspot makes the jump directly to a piece of assembly code, which is, perfectly hand-coded for each architecture. And I've just given the example here of the assembly that Ludovic wrote for the x64 architecture. But he also ported this for ARM64 and other platforms as well. And so folks who are going to be moving to Java 16, if you're having to do MD5 hashing, it just got about 15% faster. So thank you, Ludovic, for that one. And on to the next one. Stack allocation. So this was our first major attempt at doing some really deep dive research and development and looking at adding a major feature to Java. Now, all Java users out there today tend to experience challenges with garbage collection, and that is due to the amount of objects effectively being put on the heap. So we call that GC pressure. And whatever we can do at the JVM level to reduce that pressure will just help overall JVM performance. And we had a hypothesis, Nicola and Charlie did in our group, that we could replace a bunch of heap allocation with stack allocation instead. So instead of creating objects on the heap, if we can prove that the object would never ever escape, then we can just pop it on the stack instead, which as far as JVM performance is concerned is far, far more efficient. So let's have a quick look at an example of how that would work. So here, if you just have a quick scan of the code, you can see that in the line in the from section there where we declare a new myClass object, that in the old days would have been typically assigned on the heap with all of the overhead that causes for the garbage collector. Now, with the stack allocation patch that Nicola and Charlie came up with, because they were able to determine that instantiation could never ever escape, they were able to stack allocate that instead. Now, under the hood, there is a myriad of ways that objects can escape in Java, right? You can have links back to that object from something else on the heap. There's return values. There's all sorts of things that go on. And so the internal coding around this has to be very, very defensive and very cautious. And I'll show you some of the patch in the next slide, actually. It gives you a small indication. So hopefully that code is legible for folks, even folks watching this on a small screen. And you can see this is just a tiny snippet of all the work that needed to be done. And you can see by reading the comments, and you have a look at the checks and balances in the code here, how much checking that the engineers had to do in each case. And there's a whole host of these type of statements. So in the interest of doing no harm, we're still actually working on this concept. We don't believe we have captured all of the cases, all of the edge cases yet, and we're looking at simpler alternatives of giving the same benefit, but with less internal changes to the JVM. But this is kind of some of the deeper, longer-term research that we're doing to try and improve Java for everybody out there. All right, I believe it's over. Back to you, George.
Thanks, Martijn. So sort of when I showed you the timeline before, over the period of a year, we've been able to expand some really brilliant partnerships with some pretty major other companies playing in the Java world today. We worked very closely with Oracle on getting WebLogic into the Azure marketplace. We've worked very closely with IBM on getting WebSphere Cloud Paks supported. We've worked with Azul, who is the current supplier of the default JVM in Azure. We also work very closely with Red Hat, particularly on the Shenandoah collaboration that Martijn mentioned on the previous slide, as well as getting OpenShift running on Azure, which is pretty cool. We also talk to Intel and ARM pretty regularly about future architectures so that we can always ensure that Java takes advantage of those hardware gains. So hopefully we stay ahead of it rather than having to try and patch things up after a new architecture release. We also were really, really lucky to be able to talk at Microsoft's premier conference for developers. That is MS Build, for those that aren't familiar. And we were lucky because we were able to introduce Microsoft's commitment to the developer community. And we're pleased to say there was minimal heckling and a lot of genuine surprise and interest. Maybe it was your calming voice, Martijn. I'm not sure. I thought there'd be more heckling. The .NET crowd also wasn't very aware of the newly announced 6-month release cadence and Java's recent advancements. So there was a win-win for everyone being there, really. I think one of the slides that was always quite interesting to me is why Java and why do this now? You may well hear from the odd JavaScript folk that you speak to that Java is dead. Well, that is clearly not the case. Looking at this recent poll from Frostbites, Java is still the second most relied upon programming language out there. And you can see JavaScript doesn't even sort of reach this level. I think it came in at about 8th or 9th. If we look at the GitHub annual Octoverse report, which is slightly different, that's based on contributions, PRs, and what's sitting in repositories, we'll see that Java, despite being just overtaken by Python in 2019, is still the third most commonly used programming language out there. So there's still a huge demand for Java running in production environments. And so in turn, there's a huge demand for running Java on Azure. And that's why we're doing this now. There's been a huge amount of talk in the news recently about ARM. Martin mentioned ARM in some of his patches earlier on. And of course, Microsoft announced the new Surface Pro X, which is running Microsoft's SQ2 ARM-based processor. There's also the exciting folding Surface Pro Duo, which is running an ARM chip on an Android operating system. It's not just Microsoft that's on this bandwagon. Apple recently announced their Silicon chip, which will be put into all of their MacBook Pros and Mac Minis and computers. And also Google ported Chrome OS to ARM, which is a huge step in the progress of the Chromebook, and hopefully gives them a better win for the battery life. And so if ARM is so relevant, it only makes sense to port Java to Windows on ARM64. And luckily, that's exactly what we did. So back to you, Martin.
Cool, thank you. So this was a really exciting privilege for Microsoft to be able to go and do this in its first year, and that was to actually port OpenJDK, or Java itself, to a completely new platform, and that is Windows on ARM. Luckily, of course, we had leading the group, Monica Beckwith, who was the Java architect at ARM previously, as I mentioned before, and a couple of other of our fine engineers, Ludovic and Bernard, who had a lot of experience working on ARM64 platforms, and they immediately set to work. So one of the things I did straight away, and again, this really talks a lot about the ecosystem partnerships we have, is we went and spoke to Red Hat, who were the lead maintainers for the Linux ARM64 port at OpenJDK. And I had a chat to them sort of about our proposed design and architecture for bringing this Windows port in, and quickly gained their collaboration, which was fantastic and really much appreciated from us. And we set about generalizing some of the Linux ARM64 code, especially around the build and tool chain, to ensure that other platforms like Windows and subsequently Mac could be added. We then went forth and did all the hard work of actually doing the port itself, starting by cross-compiling, looking at fun things like the R18 register on Windows ARM. And I won't dig into too much detail in this keynote because Monica is actually going to give a talk about this later on today, and she will give you all the gory details. But needless to say, there was much gnashing of teeth, peering at assembly code and C code, scratching our heads at build tool chain anomalies and other fun things like that. But we've landed it successfully. We wrote the JDK enhancement proposal, which is how you get major features into OpenJDK in Java. And I'm very pleased to say that was approved and landed for Java 16. So when you go and grab either an early access build of Java 16 today, or if you go and if you want to wait for GA, which I think is in March, you can go and run Java on your Surface Book Pro X. It'll be awesome. And probably the reason why our group will be buying several of them, purely for testing out Java, of course. Yeah, so again, if you want to hear more details, please do visit Monica's talk later on. Which brings me on to the next important thing we need to do when we build Java internally. So next slide, please. So more legalese, more agreements Microsoft had to go and sign, and we were very happy to do so. So in order to make sure that when you make significant changes to Java that you are still compliant with the specification, you must pass something called the TCK, the Technical Compatibility Kit. And in order to get access to that, you have to sign an agreement called the OCTLA. I won't bore you with the details too much on that, but needless to say, there was some more legal eagle work involved on that one. And as you say, it was my boss's pen, actually, whose ink started to run dry after all of this. We now have the TCK, and we're running that internally. It is an incredible amount of work to get set up. So you run it on a per version platform basis. It's lots of CI/CD work. George has had the pleasure of doing this before at Adopt OpenJDK previously when Adopt had the TCK, and there were manual tests. So we're back in the early noughties where people have to click with their mouse on a screen in order to pass a test suite, and trying to figure out how to do that in a concurrent and parallel way to reduce build times is really important. And so we work with Adopt OpenJDK upstream on some common test harnesses around that. Cool. So that's that topic escaped. So on to Adopt OpenJDK for you, George.
Thanks, Martijn. So for those that aren't familiar with the Adopt OpenJDK project, its goal is to provide rock-solid OpenJDK and also Eclipse OpenJ9 binaries for the Java ecosystem. But it also does a lot more than that. It provides infrastructure as code, as Martijn just mentioned. It also has a build farm for builders of OpenJDK on just about any platform that can build Java today. Microsoft's been a proud sponsor of the project since 2018, providing Azure credits to help it grow. And we're really excited to announce that we've just renewed that Azure sponsorship for 3 years. And that is so that we can see the project's critical infrastructure continue. And hopefully we can kind of meet the project's needs as it continues to grow. It's also, to provide a bit of context here, the project is moving towards more dynamic infrastructure rather than having lots of static VMs spinning around all day. And so what they're needing now is more and more machines spinning up for short bursts of time. And so we wanted to do was give them lots of Azure credits so that when they want to run a test suite that takes 17 hours, they can chop that up and they can very quickly plow them through on 100 nodes or whatever they need. And that's proven to be very effective. So just to dive quickly into what that build and test pipeline would look like, all of the source code is cloned down and mirrored from Mercurial or the newly announced Scala project on GitHub. And when we kick off a build at Adopt OpenJDK, we select a branch, be that master or dev, and then that source code is pulled in and it enters our build, test, and deploy pipeline. Now, that is all run in a Jenkins instance, and it goes through the build. If the build is successful, we go into the test phase where we run literally millions. I think it's 85 million tests for every major release, which is pretty incredible. And then that build gets deployed and made available at the website or the API or the installers or however you would consume the Adopt binaries today. The really interesting thing to point out here is the approved third-party OpenJDK binaries line. What this represents today is the Red Hat provided reference implementation build of OpenJDK. So that is about as vanilla as you can get. And they put their binaries through our test and deploy stage. And that then appears on the Adopt OpenJDK website as an alternative download. But we also have lots of other vendors that are working on the project. We're doing Dragonwell builds from Alibaba. We're doing Corretto builds, as well as working with Azul on sort of midterm release support. And so it may or may not come as no surprise that Adopt OpenJDK very recently hit 200 million downloads. Depending on what Java survey you look at today, you'll see that Adopt OpenJDK tends to be, at least, the #2 most popular OpenJDK distribution out there. Why is that? That's mainly because of the multi-vendor support out there, so you can get all of the vendors working on it in one single place. Adopt OpenJDK is a community effort. There's no single vendor behind it, which means there's no vendor lock-in if you want to consume their binaries. And to be clear here, Microsoft is working with its direct competitors on this project, which is pretty cool. As to coin the old term, nobody competes on build farms. And I'd like to keep it that way. If we can all collaborate on the horrible bit and then take away and do the interesting stuff, then I think that's a win for every company involved. There's also a really exciting thing to announce, is that Eclipse is taking on all of the responsibility for the Adopt OpenJDK project. And as part of that, it will be rebranding to Eclipse Adoptium. To provide a bit of context behind this, Adopt OpenJDK is currently backed by the London Java community, which is quite close to Martijn's heart. And we kind of outgrew it being a very small user group that's basically a non-profit. And so the Eclipse Foundation has a deep history with the Java ecosystem. It has proven structures for strong vendor-neutral project governance, IP flow protection, as well as world-class marketing, legal, and hosting support. So it really was a no-brainer when it came to moving the project. We also have a technical steering committee today. There's always infamously incorrectly coined the technical steering committee because it isn't technical at all. We're actually just a steering committee. And so what that will happen is we're going to split that up, and we're going to have a project management committee, which will handle all of the technical detail. And then we're going to have a working group and a steering committee around that, which will handle things like financials, handle outreach, conferences, who can buy the t-shirts and stuff like that. So I think it's back to Martijn to talk about a few projects that that we've been involved in and how you can deploy Java to Azure.
Cool. So before I speak to this, I just wanted to touch on Adopt OpenJDK. So it's really is a labor of love that both George and I were involved in before we joined Microsoft. So George was actually interning at IBM at the time, and I was running JClarity, and we had both seen that there was a real challenge coming in the Java ecosystem, and that due to some release cadence changes and various vendors changing their subscription models for Java, that there wasn't necessarily a good vendor-neutral, stable build of OpenJDK, a binary distribution that you, the Java end users, could rely on for like years and decades to come. And that's something that Microsoft is really proud to be part of, ensuring that you will have Java, which is free as in bear and free as in use for decades to come through the Adopt project. And we're going to continue to commit to that for some time, I'm sure. So the other thing that a lot of folks may not be aware of is that behind the scenes, Microsoft has been working very hard on what we call the product truth for Java. So it's not just our Java engineering group that is involved in Java at Microsoft. If you remember all the way to the start of the talk, we talked about building the Java at Microsoft community hub internally. And as we discovered, there were many, many Java service teams, broadly classed as Java on Azure. So folks like Reza Rahman, Ed Burns, Asir, Teresa Nguyen, folks, again, that you probably know from the Java community, have all been working incredibly hard on bringing first-class services to Azure. So we're really proud to announce that we have the Azure Spring Cloud that went GA back in September. So we've been working hand-in-hand with Pivotal and VMware. Spring, obviously, Spring Cloud, Spring Boot really is a very popular microservice framework for all of you Java developers out there. And you can use it now as a platform as a service on Azure. So you get all of the benefits of having your Kubernetes and containers managed for you, because that's just horrible if you're a Java developer. Nobody likes that. And you can have all of the security, horizontal scaling, logging, access to big data sources, distribution across the globe, all that great stuff that Azure gives you today. But we haven't stopped there. Spring is just one of the broad ecosystem choices you can have. So we'll pop to the next slide. So Microsoft has this attitude, this belief that instead of forcing you as the Java developer to change your application to work on our cloud, we say you bring the Java the way you want. And if you want to bring your Java and just lift and shift it onto VMs, then you're absolutely more than free to do so. And we support that 100%. If you are a little bit further in your sort of what we would call our cloud native journey or container journey, we offer a lot of container as a service. So the Azure Kubernetes service is our premier one for that. And again, takes all of that Kubernetes headache away from you. If you're already ready for the PaaS environment or for function as a service, you can use Azure's App Service for Tomcat support that's built in. We've got the Azure Spring Cloud I talked about before, and we have Azure Functions. So you can just do pure functional code now as well. So we really have a fantastic broad range to support. Next slide, please. We've also, as George alluded to earlier, we have partnerships with Oracle for WebLogic, IBM with WebSphere and Cloud Paks, and recently we've partnered with Red Hat to bring JBoss EAP to Azure as well. So I won't dwell on this slide for too long, but needless to say, we now believe we have all of the major application servers covered, plus Spring. So no matter what type of Java application you have, you can come and bring it to Azure and you'll get a great experience. All right, let's carry on from there.
Thanks, Martijn. So we felt it would be right to do a Java keynote without at least mentioning Visual Studio Code. About a year and a half ago, they announced the coding pack for Java, which is super exciting. And of course, Visual Studio Code is growing in popularity, and it's perfect for the lightweight cloud-native developer. And so where does that fit in with Java developers? Well, you can now download the coding pack, and as part of that, you'll get VS Code. You'll also get a binary of Java provided by Adopt OpenJDK or any other vendor that you wish to swap in. And it also gives you all of the extension pack contents, which is great because it gives you such as things like syntax highlighting, it gives you code completion, beautifying. And so it's not perfect for everything, but if you want to be developing a lightweight Java application, this will work today. And it's perfect for any cloud-native Java developer. I certainly use it for some Java development. I don't know if Martin, do you use it for Java development, Martin, at all?
I have actually started to on some small microservice stuff I've been working on. So for my really heavyweight debugging big desktop applications, I still go with IntelliJ's IDE, and I don't think VS Code is ever intended to be a fully fledged IDE like that. It is really the lightweight code editor for multiple languages. But I have found it's been incredibly useful for those microservices where I'm doing a bit of JavaScript, bit of Java deployed to a container. So much faster in Visual Studio Code than IntelliJ for me personally, anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And we may be able to grab a bit of time with Bruno later on and talk about that on the AMA. I know Bruno's a big advocate for the VS Code plugin. So
especially its YAML support.
Yes, he loves YAML. So I guess that brings us to today, which is the JDConf. The thing that Bruno forgot to mention earlier is that the after party is at 10 p.m. It depends what time zone you're in, but we'll try and make an after party work. We're just basically all going to put on headphones and listen to some really rocky music, I guess. And there may even be beer if you've already stocked beer in your fridge. So moving on, we just want to quickly cover sort of what the future looks like for our group. We're aware that we're sort of coming to the end, and we're thankful for you all listening. So I'll hand back over to Martin, who's just going to tell us a little bit about what we've got to look forward to.
Cool. So this is focusing a little bit purely on the Java engineering group as opposed to all of Microsoft at Java, but I'll touch on that as well. So we're going to continue to work on OpenJDK performance enhancements. So you'll see us continue to contribute mostly to the underlying hotspot VM. You'll see us do less work on the actual class libraries. We think Oracle and others do a fantastic job of that already, and we don't see a lot of customer demand on our side to radically change Java's APIs. They've served the ecosystem well for a long time. You'll see us pushing heavily on Java 8 to 11 plus migrations. Java 11 just gives you so many developer benefits out of the box, from developer productivity, which I believe Venkat and others will get into further today, as well as under the hood performance improvements and the shrinkage of your JVM as well. If you use tools like JLink and JPackage, you can build these tightly packed, really small runtimes, which is just fantastic. But we really do want to hear from you, right? Microsoft is here to learn. We're here. We have many years to catch up on here. We want to listen. We want to understand what you want out of us in the Java ecosystem. We do bring a lot of developer tooling expertise here from Microsoft. We have runtime expertise. Obviously, the .NET Core is a very, very popular runtime out there in the world as well. So we'd love to hear from you. And with that, we will jump to the last slide on how you can contact us. So to wrap up, we are committed to Java. As you can tell, Microsoft has invested heavily. They've acquired a company. They've put together a Java engineering group. There's many Java and Azure teams are running. We have some product truth now. So if you want to bring your Java workload to Azure or try it, please do come and give it a go. If it's not working for you, we want to hear about it. And you can give us that brutally honest feedback through the Java at Microsoft Twitter handle there. You can email us at java@microsoft.com. And of course, you can visit the Java on Azure link there. So I think we're perfectly on time. So a big thank you from me, and a thank you to George for being my co-speaker. This was really good fun. And I hope to see you all in the Q&A and AMA later on.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Actually, gentlemen, because you're two British gentlemen. So we should use that more often.
We like to pretend.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. I joined Microsoft for like do Java stuff in 2018, and I never thought we would be here today hosting a Java conference. Seriously, on my first day there, I was like, a developer advocate, and that's it. So here we are. We have a Java engineering group. We have a Java conference. We have contributions to OpenJDK. We are working with Adopt OpenJDK. We have lots of usage of Java internally, as we saw yesterday with Julia. So I think it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, and especially ourselves, that Java at Microsoft is a big deal.